Thousands of feet below the foothills of southwest Persia lie productive formations containing millions of tons of crude oil. Directly above the oil is a cap or layer of high-pressure gas which supplies the energy to force the oil to the surface of the earth through steel pipes with which the well bores have been lined. At a well site, when drilling is in progress, one can see the neat stacks of drill pipe and casing close by the familiar tall derrick. The derrick is required in order that long sections of drill pipe and casing may be raised and lowered in the process of drilling the well. On the derrick floor is the hoisting gear and the turntable which grips and rotates the drill pipe. Immediately below the derrick floor is the well cellar, open-sided for ease of access. The cellar contains the top of the casing on which the wellhead is mounted. This wellhead consists of a master valve and a number of smaller valves which control the drilling fluid and will eventually control the oil when drilling has been completed and the rig has been removed. The most delicate and dangerous part of the drilling operation begins when the drill starts to cut through the last few feet of cap rock immediately above the formation which contains the highly inflammable gas and oil. To prevent the gas from blowing up through the drill pipe or well casing while the drill is progressing, a mud slurry of sufficient weight is pumped down the hollow drill shaft to counterbalance the pressure of the gas or oil. In April 1951, this stage had been reached at the rig site known as North Safed No. 20, and around the location new notice boards proclaimed "Danger, Drilling In," for it was already known that North Safed Well No. 20 would be a high-pressure gas producer with a surface pressure of around 2,430 pounds per square inch. But in drilling down into the earth's store cupboard to release her precious wealth, there is always the incalculable. In time, a driller will develop an almost uncanny instinct in feeling the action of the steel-toothed bit that is boring into the rock several miles below his feet. The smallest miscalculation can end in disaster, and on this occasion, man was to lose the first round with his fight against nature. For the first time in 40 years of the company's operations in the Persian oil fields, fire broke out in one of the drilling wells. This was no ordinary fire. That evening the surrounding country was lit by the flickering light of this midnight sun. The noise of the flames was such that within a quarter of a mile of the raging furnace it was impossible to speak. The air was foul and hotter than man could withstand, for the heat of the jet itself was estimated at some 4,000 million thermal units, enough to heat 2/3 of the homes of England. With no experience of fighting fires of this scale, the work of extinguishing this terrific conflagration was beyond the resources of those in the oil fields. A cable was sent to America calling for Mr. Myron Kinley, the world's most experienced oil firefighter, who within 80 hours traveled the 7,500 miles to Persia. Using the lee of the adjacent hills as a screen from the intense heat, gangs of Persian laborers worked round the clock to build an emergency road to the site. The wreckage of the well had caused a great horizontal tongue of relentless flame to bar all approach along the existing road from the south side. This tremendous task was completed in 4 days. It was also obvious that water would be wanted, millions of gallons of it. The normal supplies to the area were inadequate, and lengths of 6-inch pipeline had to be manhandled and laid over 22 miles of hills to bring the water from the Karun River. In the comparative cool of the hills away from the fire, the temperature was at its usual 110 in the shade. A small valley beside the drilling site was dammed with sandbags so as to form a reservoir. The water was pumped here from the Karun River to be pumped out again by the mobile fire pit. No sooner had Myron Kinley arrived than he announced his intention of going in to have a look-see. Tractors and bulldozers were modified by British and Persian technicians at North Safed. Corrugated iron sheets were erected to protect the operators, and a special mobile canopy, maneuvered by a tractor, was made to Kinley's own design. It had a roof of corrugated iron, and sheets of asbestos blanketing were hung down on either side. Hoses would play thousands of gallons of water onto it, enabling Kinley to advance, under its protection, to the very seat of the fire. Meanwhile, volunteers were arriving to help in this coming battle. Drilling engineers, construction engineers, civil engineers, geologists, crane drivers and tool pushers, every man jack knowing his job. Without the skill and know-how of these men, nothing could have been done to extinguish the fire, and it would have burned uninterruptedly for many years. Once everything was prepared, Kinley gave the order, "Get wet," and that order was to hold good for many days to come. Everything and everybody had to be kept permanently drenched with water, for without water, a man would have perished within little more than 60 seconds. The firefighting unit then began to advance. Firemen, operating from behind portable screens, kept a constant deluge of water playing onto the canopy, while they, in turn, were protected by a continuous spray from the first base. By this means, Kinley was able to get very close to the well cellar, but not close enough, for further progress was blocked by stacks of drill pipe and casing which would have to be removed. With a continuous waterfall from the monitors onto the canopy, gangs of volunteers worked to chain together bundles of these pipes, which had sagged on their supports like candles in the sun. A tractor hauled them away to the rear. It had been decided to blast away the collapsed derrick and torn debris of the control gear that was spreading the flames round the well cellar. Now that a path had been made, it was possible to decide just where the charge would have to be placed. Again, the resource and experience of Byron Kinley were called upon for this seemingly impossible task. He decided to place a 40-gallon oil drum containing the charge into a water-cooled tank. The drum to be so positioned that the water in the tank would form a cushion and help direct the blast in the required direction. The 400-gallon water tank was welded onto the end of a long length of piping, which in turn was attached to a bulldozer. All this equipment was assembled under the canopy within some 20 yards of the fire. Volunteers then began to carry the high explosive in 50-pound boxes to the shelter of the canopy. With an air temperature of 240 degrees, it only needed one man to trip and fall, and many lives would have gone with him. While the firefighting party were being evacuated from the site, the field superintendent himself packed the charges into the drum. The bulldozer then began to push the charge on the end of the pipe towards the well cellar, and the exploder was prepared for firing. The force of the explosion was to blow off the top of the wellhead and release over half a mile of 4.5-inch steel drill pipe lodged down the hole. There it goes! Like a giant snake, it writhed and twisted in the air, thus giving a new version of the time-honored Indian road trick. The object of the explosion was achieved. The obstructions around the well had been blown aside, and a single column of flame ascended vertically over 450 feet into the air. It was now possible to approach the well from the original road, and all the firefighting equipment was brought round the back of the hills to the new site. More pipeline for water had to be laid, and a new dam constructed on the south side. By May 22nd, it was possible to pump thousands of gallons a minute onto the well cellar. Kinley had decided that the second stage of the operation should be another explosion, or bomb, to blow out the flame itself by blast. In doing this, a considerable danger existed of the gases reigniting on contact with the red-hot wreckage in the vicinity. Billions of gallons of water were sprayed onto the ground surrounding the site in an attempt to lower the temperature of the metal. Meanwhile, a second canopy was brought up, this one to hold the new bomb, which had to be suspended in the air some 10 feet above the gas outlet. A 500-pound charge of gelignite was placed in an oil drum attached to the front of the canopy and maneuvered towards the flame under a deluge of water to prevent a premature explosion. When the plunger was pressed, the flame was snuffed out like a candle. One great difficulty, the heat of the fire, was now overcome. But for some days the hoses were kept going on the cellar to prevent the ever-present danger of a flashback. The still hot wreckage could easily ignite this 1,000-foot column of highly inflammable, dense gas that was screaming up into the atmosphere. First, the cellar itself had to be enlarged and excavated deeper to allow access to the casing. A full inspection of the site could then be made for the first time, 27 days after the blowout. Then began the long and difficult business of capping the well with its tremendous pressure of escaping gas. The two outer strings of casing had to be cut away, this by drilling a series of holes round the perimeter, while a continuous safeguard against fire was maintained. Once the casing had been cleared, and only the 8-inch pipe from which the gas escaped protruded from the cellar floor, it was possible to set the casing hanger in place. With considerable difficulty, it had to be passed through the tremendous pressure of the gas jet and lowered into position. The gripping device tightened, and the hole encased in a cement block. The casing hanger is a flanged collar which grips the pipe and forms a base for the great hydraulically operated Cameron valve. Both these units had been ordered by cable and flown out to Iran, the former from America and the valve from the United Kingdom. Next, it was the turn of the Cameron gate valve to go through the same operation. The valve was tethered down by steel hawsers in 4 different directions so as to prevent this 4.5 tons of metal from being tossed about like a ping-pong ball at a fun fair when suspended over the jet. Yet another danger made itself apparent at this stage. As soon as the metal touched the side of the gas jet, a violent spray of gas would be deflected. This was so powerful that it could pick up stones and rocks and dash them against any of the metal machinery in the vicinity. It only needed one small spark from a stone, and all those working on the site would have been engulfed in flames. Inch by inch, the valve was swung into position for the long hinge bolt. Once the bolt was in place, the valve was maneuvered over the jet, allowing the gas to rush upwards through its open orifice. Finally, it was lowered and bolted firmly in place. At last, the moment had come. Gradually, the valve was operated. The screaming roar became a whine. The whine became a whisper, and the whisper became silence. For the first time in 5 weeks, it was possible to speak and hear in the vicinity of what had been North Safford Rig Number 20.